Hey, Lobbert here again. As always, the deck list is in the video description along with timestamp links if you want to skip to a match. Please like my video, I really appreciate it. It boosts my visibility on YouTube, and subscribe for more Pauper content. Check out my podcast, Common Knowledge. Now let's get into the deck tech. Hey, this week I'm doing a little something different. I think this is the first time I've done something that wasn't a full league. I think I have like one other video that's not a full league, but this was the Pauper playoffs. This is the deck that I took to the playoffs. I called it Astro Boros. I'm not sure what exactly to call this. It's kind of a fusion between the aggressive parts of Boros Bully and the advantage parts of Boros Monarch that I liked. And I kind of fused the decks because, you know, Arkham's Astrolabe. This isn't like something new or novel. I think a lot of people are playing decks really similar to this, but I had a really strong win rate going into the tournament. I was sitting at, honestly, at like an 80% win rate, and that was only across, I think, 20 games, but still, that's a really good win rate, although a small sample size. I'm not going to spoil how the tournament went, but let's get into the deck tech so we can get into those games. So first off, let's go into the creatures. We just have the bird package of 4 Glinthawks and 4 core Skyfishers, and then just go into those artifacts. We have 4 Arkham's Astrolabe. Astrolabe is one of the newest additions to this format, just completely changing everything, and I wanted to be one of those people that jumped on the bandwagon, I guess. Single mana to filter for the rest of the game, and a really cheap draw spell to bounce and repeat is really, really strong. There's not a whole lot of incentive in blowing this thing up, so it's pretty safe. It can get spell stuttered and stuff, but you get to play more colored symbols, I feel like, for not a lot of cost. We also have 4 Prophetic Prisms, just a less good Arkham's Astrolabe. The only benefit to Prophetic Prism is you can cast it on things that are not snow mana, but we have plenty of snow lands in this deck, so that hasn't really been a problem. To finish out the creatures, we have a single Palace Sentinels. I couldn't rely on this card, but having one is just such a powerful effect that it alone will win you the game sometimes, just in overwhelming your opponent with card advantage when you become the Monarch. I also have 4 Seeker of the Way. This is a little bit different than a traditional Boros Monarch list, and I chose this because it is an incredibly aggressive card with casting all of the artifacts, a lot of my instant spells. This can hit very, very hard and end games quickly. This is my edge against Tron. Any aggressive deck has to deal with this first, or else I am going to be able to race them since this has lifelink. And then finally, I have 4 Thraben Inspectors holding the ground, an extra little beater so that I can clear their board and still gain some advantage. And then this thing will just be still sitting there, pinging in for 1. Then I have my instants and sorceries. Pretty much all of these are burn spells. There's a few exceptions, but I have 4 Galvanic Blasts. I'm sure you're familiar. Just 4 damage is a lot. 4 Lightning Bolts. All of my burn is able to hit both creatures and players, so I can close out games when they're at like 12, so I don't have to hit them very many times. And then I can also just point these at creatures so that they can't assemble something weird or good, and just beat through with my creatures. Clear path. I'll skip the next one and go straight to Searing Blaze. This is kind of substituting for Journey to Nowhere. I didn't really miss the Journey to Nowhere. If I needed to assemble a couple of burn spells, that was fine. But the added aggressiveness for the more difficult mana cost and not being able to kill everything. Sometimes I'm just okay trading a creature and a spell if I have to get rid of something. But I feel like I'm playing to win here and trying to end the game more quickly in playing Searing Blaze. I'm more excited to play my removal spells. And then finally, I have a single Prismatic Strands. Usually not a huge fan of this card. I'm usually looking for value, like it's just sitting in my hand and I'm just like, oh, I wish they would burn one of my creatures so I can Prismatic Strands that. But it does very much come in handy when there's Tron decks just burning you for lethal in one go, or anything else that might happen. This is also, it can be like a one-sided board wipe if they're attacking into a bunch of your creatures, or you're attacking and they have to block, and then you just save all your guys. Maybe pump your Seeker of the Way. Without any discard effects, it is a lot less good than in like a traditional bully list. And then finally, I do have 2 Battle Screeches, just a horde of guys that can either block if I have the Monarch or attack for big. Also triggering my Seeker of the Way is pretty cool. I'm really happy with this card. And then I'll just cover the lands real quick. I have 2 Ancient Dens and 3 Great Furnaces for my artifact lands. They don't really get in the way. 5 copies of artifact lands is really, really helpful. You're not relying on them enough that artifact destruction is gonna really mess you up, but it can be a little inconvenient if they have something like a Gorilla Shaman. I also have 3 Evolving Wilds. Being able to put this on the battlefield and then save it, potentially Searing Blaze at instant speed or Searing Blaze on a subsequent turn that I'm not sure I'm going to have landfall on, is really, really nice. And then I also have 2 Ash Barons. Between the Evolving Wilds and the Ash Barons, I think the deck thinning it's definitely a benefit. It's not substantial, like all deck thinning is not substantial, but it's, I think, more powerful than playing a tap land that gains you life. And then finally, we just have 5 snow-covered mountains and 5 snow-covered plains. The mana base in this is a pretty aggressive one in that only 3 of your lands are coming in tapped. I frequently use Ash Barons to just put on the battlefield, and I have enough Arcum's Astrolabes and Prophetic Prisms that it still produces mana, and that's all I need. I can change it into whatever color I need anyway and get ahead. But I was really happy with this list, and let's get into the sideboard. For the sideboard, I have 2 Electricaries for Elves and Delver matchups. This could come in against anything that plays a lot of 1/1s, but those are really the only things it ended up going in against in my testing. And then I have a single Gorilla Shaman. This was good in the mirror in that it demanded an answer of a removal spell, and it would almost always get at least a land or 2. This is a 2-for-1 creature that can lock your opponent out of the game in that it's not too hard to blow up an Arcum's Astrolabe with this. And I did see a lot of affinity in my testing, and I wanted to be prepared for that in a big way, and I think Gorilla Shaman is perfect for that. I also have 2 Lone Missionaries for the burn matchup and aggressive matchups. Being able to bounce this with Core Skyfisher is really cool. I have 3 Molten Rains. These are my favorite. I love bringing in Molten Rains in this format. Not so good late game, but like I said, since I'm trying to be more aggressive, I'm happy to run these Molten Rains. Next up, I have 3 Pyroblasts. Good in the Tron matchup, good against any blue deck. I didn't want to cut down any more on these. I don't think 4 is right either. I think 3 is definitely perfect. I also have 2 Relic of Progenitus as a catch-all for anybody trying any graveyard shenanigans. I love this card. And then finally, I have 2 Standard Bearers. I stuck with Standard Bearer since its versatility in this format, in that it's fine to bring in against burn. I don't know if the slots allow for me to do that, but it's an option. It's good against Elves, it's good against Boggles. I don't have any way to blow up an enchantment after it's already on the battlefield, but I still feel that this card is perfectly good and more than fine. It can just lock your opponent out of the game and force them to have a gut shot or something, and that is always in their hand, and you just win. So let's get into the games. A little disclaimer, I did have to use the Magic Online replay system. It worked fine, but you're not going to have my exact mouse movements, and I didn't record these matches while I was playing because I wanted to have my full attention on just winning the game and not timing out. So let's get into the games. So first match is against QB Turtle 15. This is the only game that I did remember to hit record, so I have my mouse movements on this one. This first hand does not have any land, so we're of course shipping that back. The second hand, not the strongest, but this Thraben Inspector could end up drawing us into the cards we need, and Seeker of the Way can close out a game pretty quick if we draw what we need. I'm going to put a Great Furnace on the bottom. We don't need any more land right now. So start off with an untapped land so that we can throw out a Thraben Inspector. So Ponder. This could be a Delver deck or a control deck, or something that we're just not expecting altogether. Turn comes back to us. I'm just going to attack here and follow up with a Seeker of the Way. Trying to be as aggressive as possible, resolve spells while we can. Opponent plays an island and passes straight back to us. So sensing a little danger here, we're just going to go straight to combat, and we're going to plan on playing this Evolving Wilds and just popping the clue so that they don't have any anything to Spellstutter Sprite or Counterspell or anything. Looks like they're going to snap our Seeker of the Way, so that's probably going to see a Counterspell on the way back down. They untap without playing anything additional and play a Fairy Miscreant. So we're just going to pop our clue and fetch. That is a little bit suboptimal. I probably should have fetched and then drawn, just because we are flooded a little bit. Turn comes back to us. And we're just going to go straight into combat here. Short of a mutagenic growth, I don't think that there's any chance that they're going to block with their valuable Fairy Miscreant. Post-combat, I play a Prophetic Prism, see what I draw before doing anything else. Still probably not going to play this Glint Hawk after. Okay, it sees a Counterspell. So we're just going to drop our land, and this is an opportunity to play our Seeker of the Way again. Turn goes back to them. Let's see if they have a ninja or anything tricky. There's a Ponder. No blocks. And turn comes straight back to us, so they're still holding up 2. And we have an opportunity here. We can play this Battle Screech and buff up our Seeker of the Way. Even if they counterspell this, we can play another white creature and get out the second half of it. And that's pretty cool. So they're going to snap our Seeker of the Way and then deprive. So now we don't have 3 white creatures to flash back our Battle Screech. So that was pretty good on our opponent's part. And we're just going to keep beating in for 1. I think this Thraben Inspector has done 3 or 4 damage already. It came down turn 1 and has attacked every turn. So I guess that would be 4 damage. It's serving us so well. We're going to throw down a second Thraben Inspector and pass the turn. Opponent is, since they played a Deprive, is back down to 2 land, and we know that they can play another one. And so far this just looks like mono blue. There's a Fairy Seer, and he scoops the match. So off to a good start. We're going to board in 2 Electrickeries and 3 Pyroblasts. We're going to be taking out Prismatic Strands. They don't have any burn spells, and I don't want to be sitting there waiting for a combat step. And there could be some weird stuff with Spire Golem where it's just not going to prevent anything. So I think that's too much trouble for not enough payoff. For our other cuts, we're going to be taking out 3 Thraben Inspectors and this Palace Sentinels. The Palace Sentinels, a lot of the time, will get stuck in our hand since they have so many flyers. And then the Thraben Inspectors just, the thinking is they don't block enough. So this does risk my opponent kind of out-advantaging me since I'm taking out some of my 2-for-1s. But I just had to make room, and I feel like the Pyroblasts and things were worth it to protect my more valuable creatures. So in my opening hand, I do have access to all of my colors, snow-covered land in Evolving Wilds, since I can go fetch one. Turn 2, I will be able to Searing Blaze, because I can throw down my Evolving Wilds and decide what color I'm going to get. It looks like they have kind of made that decision for me in that they've played a Delver of Secrets, and I want to get that off the field as soon as possible. Lucky no flip there. And we're just going to end up fetching a mountain so that we can Searing Blaze this. We drop our Great Furnace and throw out our Searing Blaze. That immediately gets counterspelled, and turn goes back to our opponent. No flip on the Delver once again, and he's going to drop a Fairy Seer, so the Fairy count is going to start increasing, and I'm going to have to draw some burn spells quick to try to make up for this. We're going to throw out an Arkham's Astrolabe. Hopefully this will either tap out our opponent, or ideally it would just resolve. And it actually does. So we have our Arkham's Astrolabe and can produce any color of mana. And since he has 2 blue up, I don't want to throw my Seeker of the Way into potential danger. So we're just going to throw out a Prophetic Prism. Our opponent, of course, has the Spellstutter Sprite, and that's what we were afraid of. And off of the top, they reveal Hydroblast, flipping their Delver. So now we're staring down 5 power-wielded creatures. They throw out a Ponder, and our Pyroblast is just there to negate their Hydroblast now. They are tapped out now because they found a Ninja, and they play an island, so I guess they're not tapped out. They're leaving up Hydroblast. And this is my opportunity to establish something on the board. I throw out my Seeker of the Way in hopes of blocking that Ninja, and I can Galvanic Blast and Hydroblast in response. I do have to keep in mind that they have a Spellstutter Sprite in their hand because it was returned with Ninja. So they untap, go to combat, and only attack with the flyers, unfortunately. And I'm just going to take this. They have too much mana available to them for me to feel safe, and I know that they have a Hydroblast. I could really get blown out there. So on my turn, the race has begun. I'm going to clear a path for my Seeker of the Way by killing this Ninja. I don't want to attack if it means that their Ninja is going to be able to attack me. They have a Mutagenic Growth, so this is going to force another spell out of me, and they still have 3 mana up. I throw out my Galvanic Blast. So we're going to get that Hydroblast out of their hand now. I'm running really low on life, so I'm going to attack here despite them having a Ninja. And throw out my Pyroblast to get one of the remaining cards out of their hand. I don't want them to have anything for my next turn, since I'm going to be trying to catch back up. Things are looking pretty grim here. Another Fairy Seer for my opponent, so I'm really going to have to race here to keep up. I'm going to cycle my Ash Barrens before I do anything, and then I'm just going to go ahead and cast this Battle Screech to get some blockers out there and trigger my Seeker of the Way. This meets a counterspell, and so now I'm tapped out and forced to attack with my 3/3 lifelinker. They don't quite have lethal, so I will go down to 1 and see how big I can make my guy. Hopefully they don't have any more counterspells. And that is it. They had another Spellstutter Sprite in hand, and I'm forced to concede the game. So going on to the 3rd game in the match. No changes to my sideboard. This is not a great hand, but there are some cards like Arcum's Astrolabe and Prophetic Prism that make this a very, very good hand. I know that Core Skyfisher can beat out most things in the air, and a Lightning Bolt is going to help me stay a little bit ahead on board. First turn, I'm just going to run out this Great Furnace. I don't see me needing to speed ahead on mana that much, and I'd rather have the mana early. And I draw for turn into a land. I drop my Evolving Wilds and pass the turn. I'm not in a hurry to cast these Core Skyfishers since I'm waiting for like an Arcum's Astrolabe or something to that effect. And I still have Bolt mana open, and I'm just going to fetch on my opponent's end step. So another Core Skyfisher. I have Bolt mana open in case I need to react to a creature, but this Core Skyfisher is just going to see a counterspell. He goes up to 3 land and plays a Fairy Miscreant. So another land for me, not what I was looking for, but we'll see if we can get a Spellstutter Sprite. Nope, another hard counterspell. We run into a Deprive. Just gonna drop my Great Furnace and pass the turn once more. Still holding out for an Astrolabe or something. I don't want to drop this yet because I'm so far behind already. So I find a Galvanic Blast. I go for my Core Skyfisher. I feel like I need to block, and there's a fairly good chance of this resolving. So this does actually resolve, and I'm able to return a Ancient Den. Not the most exciting thing, but I think it's what I have to do in this situation. I'm a little upset that I have to burn through all of my Core Skyfishers, which are supposed to be one of my all-star cards, in the first few rounds where I don't have an Astrolabe or anything like that. I finally find something pretty good. It is a Battle Screech, so we're going to cast that and see if we can get a whole bunch of flyers onto the board. This is going to meet a hard counterspell once again, and I'm just forced to stay back and defend from ninjas and just that pesky damage. Ponder out of my opponent. So I feel like there's some shenanigans going on here. I know that if he plays a ninja, he won't have the mana to defend it, so I just go ahead and don't block. Another land drop is what I find off of the top of my deck. I still don't attack with my Core Skyfisher, intending to block. And I draw a Pyroblast off of the top, so this is going to let me interact with those hard counterspells finally. So I'm kind of building up a hand so that I can push through a spell, and unfortunately my opponent is at 7 cards in hand. I find an Ash Barrens off of the top, so we're just going to, as quickly as we can, cycle that, thin our deck a little bit, make a land drop, and pass the turn. Opponent comes in with that Fairy Miscreant one more time. I'm kind of just posturing with my Core Skyfisher since I think they have so many counterspells in their hand, and this isn't what I want to fight over. So we're going to drop our Seeker of the Way. First up, a Spellstutter Sprite comes out. So this is something that we can use our Lightning Bolts and Galvanic Blasts on. So we're going to snap off a Lightning Bolt. Our Lightning Bolt actually resolves, and so our Seeker of the Way, nope, it meets a hard counter. So we're going to Pyroblast that and hope that they don't have Dispel or Hydroblast. And they have Hydroblast. So I see this as an opportunity to get a little bit ahead. I kill their Fairy Miscreant and just start getting in for 2 with my Core Skyfisher. They go ahead and drop a Fairy Seer, getting all the more value. They are at 3 cards in hand, and I'm just at 2. Searing Blaze is a fine draw, but not great. I'm hoping to use it to push through another spell, and in the meantime, block with my Core Skyfisher. I find a Prophetic Prism, and it is able to resolve, so I've finally got a Filter Rock into play. I'm going to drop my Snow-Covered Plains so that it enables my Searing Blaze, and then just drop my Searing Blaze on my opponent's creature. It will meet a Spellstutter Sprite. I can respond to that with a Galvanic Blast. I'm finally able to clear the board, so he is down to 2, draws up to 3 cards, but I guess I do have a Battle Screech in the yard. So if I can draw into draw into draw, I will be able to beat him. I do draw a Searing Blaze, and I shoot that off to clear the board one more time. And he has a Mutagenic Growth. goes back to his turn, and yeah, he has a ninja. So he's able to replay that Fairy Seer, sort out his next couple of draws, and he's going to be drawn 2 cards a turn. I find an Electrickery that would have been useful any other turn in this game, but right now it doesn't do a dang thing against that ninja. My opponent gets in, plays a Delver of Secrets. Following turn, I do finally draw my Glinthawk. So this is my chance. I have to draw really well here. Pick up my Prophetic Prism, drop my Prophetic Prism, and a land. That's not the fantastic draw I was talking about, but they are down to 1 card in hand, and I am able to 2-for-1 my opponent with my Electrickery. Nope. They had a Hydroblast. That was the last card in their hand, was a Hydroblast. Off of the top, my opponent reveals that they had another Hydroblast. Oh, they have another Hydroblast. I'm thinking about blocking that ninja, but I end up deciding to go with the Fairy Miscreant. This is both value and not. I have to hope that they draw into something that's not good and just take the value where I can get it. I am getting a permanent off of the battlefield. I draw another land, so I'm really not drawn well here. I'm just going to go ahead and pass. I'm going to use this Glinthawk to block that ninja, if at all possible. If they end up having to snap my creature to get in, that's an overall benefit for me, as long as they don't counter it on the way back down. So I'm able to clear that ninja off the table, and I just have 2 more turns, 1 more turn, thanks to this Fairy Seer. And we gotta draw gas. There's a Glinthawk. Let's see if we can do the Prophetic Prism bounce. Nope. My opponent has a Spellstutter Sprite, and that is going to be the game. So I am off to a 0-1 start. I'm going to try not to be tilted and have some good games. All right, round 2. My opening hand is, again, no artifacts that draw cards, a couple of Glinthawks that care about drawing cards, and a useless Prismatic Strands. I'm just going to throw that back. My second hand is 3 red spells, a plains, and then 2 white spells that cost more than 1. So I can't play any cards in this hand, so I'm going to ship that back as well. Finally, my 5-card hand is 2 Seeker of the Ways and a Galvanic Blast. I can cast all of these cards, and I don't think it's getting any better. I scry an Ash Barrens to the bottom of my deck, drop a mountain so that I have access to Galvanic Blast, and pass the turn. My opponent plays a Kyrian Ranger. I decide not to kill that. The off chance that they're just on a 1-land hand isn't super great, and I would rather this be triggering my Seeker of the Way if this does end up being Stompy. On my turn, I draw a Glinthawk, so I'm just looking for an artifact that draws a card, and I drop my Seeker of the Way. So this does end up being Elves. You can tell from the Elves. They, of course, are playing a Priest of Titania. I'm going to drop my last land and attack with my Seeker of the Way. Surprise, surprise, no blocks here. But surprise, I am going to Galvanic Blast his Priest of Titania for that extra lifelink damage. I follow this up with playing another Seeker of the Way. My opponent drops a Birchlore Rangers essentially for free thanks to Kyrian Ranger. Returns a forest to untap Birchlore Rangers, which allows him to replay it and throw down a Timberwatch Elf. I am at a burn in my hand, and he follows this up again with a Kyrian Ranger. So this is starting to look bad. I throw out my Glinthawk as kind of a desperation play and replay my Ancient Den. My opponent casts a Nettle Sentinel, follows it up with a Lissalana Huntmaster, and follows that up with a Priest of Titania. I don't see a way out of this, and I scoop the match. I did not record what I sideboarded, but I believe it is Electrickeries and Standard Bearers, so that they can't untap with Kyrian Ranger or kill me with a Timberwatch Elf. My first hand, unfortunately, is another one I cannot keep. It has Electrickery, but a single Ash Barrens is not really what I'm looking for in a hand. Second hand, it again is a one-lander with only Ash Barrens, so I'm going to throw this one back as well. My 5-card hand is, again, one of the hands that does not have any bounce artifacts, but only has the birds. So these are some pretty awful hands, but we're going to keep trying. We bottom our Evolving Wilds, play our Great Furnace, and plan to cycle Ash Barrens. My opponent plays a Llanowar Elves and passes back to us. I draw a Snow-Covered Mountain, not altogether helpful, and my opponent already has a Timberwatch Elf in play. Fortunately, on our turn, we draw a Searing Blaze and have the landfall trigger so that we can get this off the field ASAP. My opponent plays Winding Way and then follows it up with Land Grant, so we are able to see their hand. They've got a Forest, a Viridian Longbow, an Elvish Visionary, a Llanowar Elf, Carrion Ranger, and another Llanowar Elf. They throw down that Elvish Visionary and pass the turn back to us. We're still drawing land, so we'll just throw down one of those and pass back to them. They Spider Silk Armor, Carrion Ranger, Essence Warden, and then Llanowar Elves. We are able to draw a Searing Blaze. I don't think this is the time to play it due to there not being enough high value elves out. So I'm just going to drop a Core Skyfisher and bounce my Snow-Covered Plains. I do want to play Core Skyfisher to block since they have 5 power of elves out already. So now I'm feeling the pressure, and I Searing Blaze one of their Carrion Rangers because they have played a Viridian Longbow. That Longbow with those Carrion Rangers can easily tap and untap over and over to kill what little creatures I have, and it looks like they're just going to do just that anyway, followed up with another Carrion Ranger. So my bird goes down and they attack us for 6. Finally find an Arkham's Astrolabe, which finds me an Ancient Den. I do feel good about playing my Core Skyfisher to bounce my Astrolabe, see what that draws me. It is a Lightning Bolt, so I take out another Carrion Ranger, trying to slow down this Viridian Longbow. They are still able to ping me, untap, and equip to another creature to kill my Core Skyfisher. So I'm down to nothing, a land in hand, and they have plenty of creatures. I find a mountain off of the top, and that is just too much, and I scoop the game. So now we are down 0-2 and just trying to get in the swing of things and get some wins here. Round 3, we're going against Ready Bear. This opening hand is amazing. I have a Snow-Covered Land, 3 artifact lands, so I know that I'm going to be able to Galvanic Blast for 4 when the time comes. Really, Arkham's Astrolabe makes most hands really, really good. I know that I can Seeker of the Way, so let's get into this. I drop my Snow-Covered Plains and my Astrolabe turn 1. He drops a Fairy Seer, so it looks like a replay of the mono blue matchup. I drop a second white source and bounce my Astrolabe to put out a blocker. On my turn, I drop my Astrolabe one more time and throw down my Seeker of the Way. I'm preferring putting my own threats out there rather than destroying his 1/1. He is able to Skred my Seeker of the Way and then drop Delver of Secrets. Fortunately, on my turn, I draw a Glint Hawk, and this is perfect. So I drop my Glint Hawk, bounce my Astrolabe, and play that one more time. And I find a Galvanic Blast. So I'm going to attack here. And I will drop my Prophetic Prism post-combat just to see if I can sculpt a little bit of a better hand and find another land. My opponent reveals Accumulated Knowledge to Delver and then follows that up with a Preordain, drops a second Snow-Covered Mountain, decides not to attack, and passes the turn back. I begin my turn by bolting that Delver since I don't want him blocking, and I will attack with both of my creatures. I hurry and bolt that Fairy Seer so that he can't play a Ninja or anything to catch back up on his turn. I attack one more time with my 4 power of creatures. That meets a Lightning Bolt, and I will settle for that 2 damage. unfortunately, I click through my combat step and don't attack with my Glint Hawk. It kind of becomes okay when he Skreds it on my end step, so I like to think that I wouldn't have gotten that damage anyway, but it potentially could have won me the game if I had attacked there. I don't think I would have double Galvanic Blasted, but I don't feel too bad about that punt. On my opponent's turn, they drop an Augur of Bolas. I see them tapped a little bit low. If they go for a Spellstutter Sprite on my Galvanic Blasts, I can Searing Blaze, and they go for the counter spell. So I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to resolve a spell and get rid of their creature and do them 3 damage. So now they are at 3. They can't really let anything resolve, or I will win the game. So I draw a Lightning Bolt. I don't fire this off immediately since they have open mana, and I think I can find a turn where I can double, triple spell and find an opening for this thing. Our Thraben Inspector does resolve, and it draws us another Lightning Bolt. Our Thraben Inspector eats a Skred, and my opponent drops a Delver of Secrets. Off of the top, I find an Arkham's Astrolabe, drop that, which finds me a Palace Sentinels. I think that I have a pretty good shot of triggering enough counter magic with just this that I could win the game. If they decide not to do that, maybe their Delver won't flip and I will be the Monarch for several turns. So those are some pretty good odds. And I draw a Secret of the Way off the top. Another Lightning Bolt would have killed him. He does flip the Delver, and he double bolts my guy. So I won't be able to retake the Monarch anytime soon. Again, here is another misplay. I bolt his Delver to maintain the Monarch. There's really no excuse for this. I just wasn't thinking in like protecting the Monarch is the most important thing when you're just going by muscle memory and not thinking about killing your opponent. So I try to bolt this here. My opponent fortunately has the counter spell and decides to use it on that rather than the bolt that I'm going to send at their face, and I end up winning that game despite my multiple punts. Game 2. This is a really good hand. Why? Because it has Arkham's Astrolabe in it. It has access to white and red before I even cast my Astrolabe. On turn 2, I should be able to drop my Astrolabe and my Glint Hawk if I need to, or I can also just Searing Blaze. So drop in this Evolving Wilds to have access to my mana. He's not going to do anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab my Plains here. And a Galvanic Blast is perfect, so I can drop my Astrolabe without being spell stuttered, and I decide that it is more worth it to hold up Galvanic Blast than possibly run a Glint Hawk into a spell stutter sprite. Off of the top, I draw an Evolving Wilds, which, again, perfect. All I need is land drops. I drop my Core Skyfisher since they can't counter a 2 CMC spell, and then throw down my Evolving Wilds. My opponent Skreds my creature, and then throws down a Stormbound Geist. I'm not planning on Searing Blazing this, so I just go for my Evolving Wilds. And there's an opening, so this is where I'm going to try to play Arkham's Astrolabe as many times as I can. Again, my creature eats a Lightning Bolt, and they get in for 2. Find another land, and I have enough burn that I feel like it is safe to drop my Glint Hawk. It is safe, and return my Astrolabe, play that again, draw my Secret of the Way, and play that. No contest on any of my spells, and now I have a ground creature that can race their creature in the air. Unfortunately, that does eat a Skred, and it's too big for me to protect. And they are fine having a damage race, so I'm going to attack with this Glint Hawk. Since I have 2 Searing Blazes, it's possible for me to take out this Stormbound Geist. I want the moment to be perfect, though, so I'm not going to do it immediately into his double blue. So I'd prefer to go for these Prophetic Prisms and just pass the turn here. My opponent attacks me one more time with his Stormbound Geist and passes back to me. On my turn, I draw a Thraben Inspector. I get in with Glint Hawk before I do anything else. Drop my Thraben Inspector. See what I get off of that. And then I'm going to hold up for Prismatic Strands here and just drop an Evolving Wilds. I am immediately rewarded for leaving up for Prismatic Strands. I'm going to try to save my Glint Hawk. They're going to use a hard counter on my Prismatic Strands, and I can't just flash that back. They find a second Stormbound Geist, so I'm not going to pop my Evolving Wilds so that I will ensure that I have a land drop next turn. I end up finding an Ash Barrens anyway, and I just throw that down so that I have the most mana available to me as possible. So the first Searing Blaze comes out, and it will get their Stormbound Geist. That's not the surprise. Let's do our second Searing Blaze. It's going to be a Hydroblast, and our Galvanic Blast is going to take down the creature, allowing us to attack through. So now we're a little bit ahead in the damage race, and we have a Galvanic Blast in our hand. He reveals a counterspell off of Astro Boros. On our turn, we drop a Thraben Inspector, which meets a Spellstutter Sprite. They use their counterspell they just got on the Electrickery, and I am able to use the last card in my hand, Galvanic Blast, to ensure that I get my Thraben Inspector. I immediately pop my clue, find a Pyroblast, and kill their Augur Bolas so that I can start getting in with this Thraben Inspector. My opponent returns their Stormbound Geist to play a Ninja. You don't see that very often since it's such an expensive play, but it definitely works here, but they're tapped out. On my turn, I just attack for 2 with my Thraben Inspectors and have an opportunity to play my Glint Hawk. Off of the Astrolabe, I draw into another Galvanic Blast, so I'm just trying to get him low enough to where I can end this game. Drop a Secret of the Way, and attempt to Galvanic Blast his Ninja of the Deep Hours to clear path for my Thraben Inspectors one more time. Opponent down to 5. And they're going to drop an Augur Bolas, but he's going to have a lot more to contend with this combat. With this Thraben Inspector, I decide that it's worth it to pop my Evolving Wilds, just for that little bit of deck thinning. I feel like this could be the last turn of the game, and 0.5% could help here. I do draw a Galvanic Blast, so I'm just going to attack with everything. I think that the blocks are too awkward. He is able to Skred my Lone Missionary, Lightning Bolt my Glint Hawk, which means only 1 damage is getting through. Fortunately, I have 4 damage in hand, and I am able to close this out. With our first win, we go into round 4, 1 and 2. Playing against Winged Hussar. We are on a 1-land hand. We are able to cast Thraben Inspector, but that just doesn't cut it. Our second hand is 3 Glint Hawks, Evolving Wilds, Secret of the Way, and Searing Blaze. Again, I don't think that's going to cut it. Our 5-card hand is no lands, so let's get rid of that as well. And with our 2-card hand, we have a Glint Hawk that we can't cast and a Searing Blaze. We decide this is fantastic. We're going to keep this and scry a Searing Blaze to the bottom, since we can't cast that for its 3 damage. Off of the top, we do draw an Ash Barrens, which means that we can get this Glint Hawk down, and we're playing against Tron, so not the most aggressive hand that I'm playing, but maybe we have a chance. We do draw Seeker of the Way off of our Prophetic Prism, and that's kind of what we're looking for in the Tron matchup. He plays an Expedition map and passes the turn. On our turn, we draw an Evolving Wilds that we don't plan on using this turn, but we drop our Seeker of the Way and then follow that up with a Glint Hawk. He responds by popping that Expedition map to go and find his last Tron piece. With his newly found Tron, he drops a Prophetic Prism, Trinket Mage, Arkham's Astrolabe and passes back to us. That Trinket Mage, we are able to Searing Blaze, trigger our Secret of the Way, and get in for 5 with our creatures. So overall, we did 8 damage this turn. That's pretty dang good. On our opponent's turn, they find a Trinket Mage, find another Arkham's Astrolabe. They use their first Astrolabe to play, and then cast a Forbidden Alchemy. They follow this up with Weather the Storm. Storm count was 3, so there's 3 copies of this. That's going to be 12 life. Bring them back up to 24. We top deck a Core Skyfisher, which we will be able to play and bounce our Prophetic Prism next turn. Crack our land, and once again clear a path for our creatures and do another 8 damage to our opponent. They throw out a Pulse of Marasa, get back a Muldrifter and immediately play that. Throw down a 3rd Arkham's Astrolabe and pass the turn back to us. Our draw for turn is Galvanic Blast, which is going to be useful in clearing another path and keeping the creatures off of the field. We start off with a Prophetic Prism, though, to pump up our guy and see what our options are. Opponent decides to prohibit that, and that is awfully annoying since our Core Skyfish will not have anything to bounce. Turn goes back to the opponent, and they play a Muldrifter immediately. They follow this up with a Mnemonic Wall and get back Prohibit. Now I'm kind of spell locked out of the game. If they have Ghostly Flicker, then there's no point in attacking here. I don't attack because I don't want to lose my Glinthawk, and they end up using that mana instead on a Mystical Teachings. So now they're exactly in the position they want, but I'm going to try to mess them up by Galvanic Blasting their Muldrifter so I can get in the air in future turns. I don't want to kill their Mnemonic Wall because I'm afraid of Pulse of Marasa just looping that back, and I would never win that way. They do end up having Pulse of Marasa and grab their Muldrifter that I just killed back. They evoke this and are able to Ghostly Flicker it, so they're going to be drawing 4 cards and getting that Ghostly Flicker back once more. If that's not enough, they follow that up with another Mnemonic Wall and then a Weather the Storm. So they go up to 37. They are tapped out, so I'm going to kill that Muldrifter, but the writing is on the wall here. They're going to cast a few more spells, and I am going to scoop this up because they have infinite Ghostly Flickers that they might not even need to cast. Yep, there's a Dinrova Horror, and they have just bounced me out of the game. Game 2 against Winged Hussar. I find a 7-lane hand that is pretty keepable. It's got a Prophetic Prism and a Glinthawk, so that's 2 redraws. I've got Ashbarrens if I need to get white mana without the Prophetic Prism, Pyroblast to interrupt what he's doing, and then that Galvanic Blast again to interrupt what he is doing. On his end step, I cycle for that Plains. My draw for turn is Palace Sentinels. Can't cast that yet, so I'm just going to go ahead with playing Prophetic Prism. The Prophetic Prism draws me an Arkham's Astrolabe, which is great for the next turn. On his turn, he just plays Prophetic Prism of his own, so now he's got 2 Tron pieces and Fixing. I am going to play my Astrolabe and follow it up with Glinthawk, and then leave up Pyroblast. Off of my Astrolabe, I do find a Molten Rain I can't cast yet this turn, but that will be super useful for keeping him a little bit behind in the coming turns. He ends up playing a Snow-Covered Island, so he's not super far ahead on mana yet, and I'm just going to take out this Trinket Mage before it can cause me problems with him finding an Expedition map or finding another Astrolabe. So now I have a creature that I can attack with, get him down to 18, and I have a really tough decision. I have to either decide whether I want to cast Molten Rain or I want to cast Palace Sentinels. I end up going with the Palace Sentinels just because there's nothing he can do to take it back from me, and I have a Galvanic Blast to protect it, so I'm just going to be drawing 2 cards for a long time. Find a Plains, that's kind of what I'm looking for. He casts a Dinrova Horror, bouncing my Palace Sentinels. Palace Sentinels I don't really care about since it's already done its job, and I just throw that back away. On my turn, I cast Arkham's Astrolabe to get back up to 3 artifacts for Metalcraft, and cast my Galvanic Blast, killing his Dinrova Horror, follow that up with Molten Rain on his Urza's Tower. I get in for another 2, pass the turn. Unfortunately, he does have another Urza's Tower without, any additional work, so he's able to drop a Mole Drifter. Fortunately, it's just an evoked Mole Drifter, so that thing's not going to be in my way. And then he casts a Prophetic Prism. With his last 3 mana, he uses Pulse of Barasa to get that Tron Horror back one more time. And on my turn, I have plenty of Thraben Inspectors, so we're going to start cycling those and seeing what we can draw. Unfortunately, with the first one, we just draw another land. I'll throw it on my second one and leave up 2 mana to either cycle Ash Barrens or pop a Clue. My opponent throws down that Dinrova Horror and bounces one of my lands because there's not really any other good targets since they're all ETB cards. And on his end step, I decide to go with the Ash Barrens. I figure since I'm going to be drawing a card at the start of my turn, in the middle of my turn with the Clue, and then at the end of the turn with the Monarch, those percentage points really add up. So I just want to get that cycled as soon as possible. I do find a Glint Hawk, so that's going to be an additional draw off of Arkham's Astrolabe. Find a Prophetic Prism off of that, and that just finds me another Plains. I use my last 2 mana to pop that Clue. I feel like that is a punt since I could draw something off of the Monarch, but I do have a lot of creatures to block with, so not that big of a deal, and I can still get in for 2 here. End of turn. He is going to Weather the Storm and use all of my spells against me. Go back up to 28. For my Monarch draw, I just draw a Core Skyfisher. He plays a Mnemonic Wall, so that could be scary, to get back a Pulse of Marasa, which he immediately uses to get back that Mole Drifter out of his graveyard. He attacks with his Dinrova Horror. I chump block happily, and he throws down that Mole Drifter. So for turn, I do draw a Searing Blaze, which is going to carve a path out for my 4 power of creatures in the air. Follow that up with Core Skyfisher. Astrolabe draws me yet another land. Monarch trigger, I do get a Prophetic Prism. I'm going to throw away my last Thraben Inspector to this Dinrova Horror. And my opponent plays a Wretched Gryff, which is bad news, because I need specifically Galvanic Blast, or I guess I can 2-for-1 myself to deal with it. For turn, I do get a Seeker of the Way, so that is a plan to kind of push through some damage. I drop my Prophetic Prism to see what I get, and it does find me a Thraben Inspector. That'll be nice to block that Dinrova Horror with. And I am hoping that this Clue draws me into a Galvanic Blast. It does draw me into that blast, but my opponent has the Dispel. So I'm just going to pass here. My opponent plays Mystical Teachings. Sorry, I'm not sure what he got there. And for my Monarch draw, I draw a Molten Rain, which he has 2 of each Tron land conveniently, so I can't really do anything with beside get him down on Urza's Towers. On my opponent's turn, they will attack with Dinrova Horror and Wretched Gryff. So I'm going to stack up on this Wretched Gryff and block that Dinrova Horror with a Thraben Inspector. I do only lose 1 creature, so I 1-for-1 with that Wretched Gryff, and I am able to maintain the Monarch. They drop a Mortuary Mire, which gets back a Mole Drifter. Real quick, I'm just going to throw down this Molten Rain on their Urza's Tower, and then drop double Seeker of the Way. I'm able to get in for 2 damage. I want to hold back the other 2 in case there's some weird shenanigans. And for Monarch, I draw another Seeker of the Way, so I'm up to 3 here. When he attacks with Dinrova Horror, I decide I'm just going to go for the 2 Seeker of the Ways, and they decide that they're going to flicker. I don't lose my guys. They bounce a Seeker of the Way, and I'm able to just throw away one of these lands that I drew off of the Monarch. On my turn, I draw a Thraben Inspector once more, so I will throw that down first to see if I can get a good redraw here. Find another Molten Rain, go for a tower one more time, which he responds to with Ghostly Flicker. Bounces my Seeker of the Way again. I decide not to attack, and I didn't play either of my Seekers. That could be... I feel like that is a misplay. I think some action there would have been good in either Seeker or something. Fortunately, off of my Monarch trigger, I draw Relic of Progenitus. So we're going to be using that to try to stop him from comboing off. I trade off my Glinthawk and chump with my Thraben Inspector to maintain the Monarch. He follows it up with a Moldrifter. And throws down a Trinket Mage. Trying to play up his advantage and kind of close this game out, I feel like, is what he's trying to do. And he's only got 3 mana up at this point. So for my draw for turn, I find Seeker of the Way number 4. So I'm just going to throw down every single Seeker of the Way in my hand as bait spells. And then finally, I'm going to drop my Relic of Progenitus, which meets a Ghostly Flicker. The Ghostly Flicker is bouncing the wall and a land. They are going to be able to counterspell this with the prohibit they pull out of the yard with their Mnemonic Wall. And for my Monarch trigger, I end up getting a Galvanic Blast, which I'm going to use on that Mnemonic Wall as soon as I can. So now I'm down to 0 cards in the hand. They're at 6. They drop a Moldrifter, go up to 7. Play an Astrolabe for a redraw, and now they're actually behind on cards. After this Forbidden Alchemy, they're way behind on cards, and they're down to 14 in their library. That is not an irrelevant thing in the Tron matchup. In my draw for turn, I draw Core Skyfisher, so this means I'm going to be able to keep bouncing Astrolabe, buff all of my Seeker of the Ways. Opponent taps a land and cycles Remote Isle, and I'm kind of free to go here. I find another Astrolabe off of this. Triggers. I find a Searing Blaze off of that Astrolabe. Go to combat, and I know that I haven't made a landfall trigger yet, so I'm just going to attack here, and I will be able to eat both of their creatures in combat, as well as do 10 damage lifelinking to their face. So I'm going to go up to a healthy 40 life. Have 2 blockers for the air, they're down to 10, and draw a Ancient Den for my Monarch trigger. On their turn, they try to count up their mana to see if they can do enough with probably a Rolling Thunder or anything. They are able to clear my board, so I'm down to one creature. I am still the Monarch, so I'm just going to pass here, and for my Monarch trigger, I draw a Galvanic Blast. My opponent's turn, they lay down another Moldrifter, which means they're going to have 7 cards in hand and 5 in library. Use an Expedition map to go and find a Power Plant. Impulse to look at all of the rest of the 4 cards in their library. And I think they're trying to kill themselves at this point. Mnemonic Wall back, Pulse of Marasa. Attack for 2. I'm just going to let it go through since they're at 3 cards in deck and I want them to be the Monarch. I'm at a healthy 36. They're going to Pulse of Marasa back another Mnemonic Wall. And they do have to go to cleanup step because they're at 8 cards in hand. I decide not to do anything despite my opening here. I don't think that there's anything that they could do at this point unless they had some really secret tech in here to win. I do draw a Pyroblast, kind of securing my victory. They're just dropping an Astrolabe. I'm deciding if I want to do something, and they scoop the match. Finally, game 3. Our hand looks fine. We've got some aggressive stuff. We've got Prophetic Prism, and they've got 2 minutes, 40 seconds on the clock. So he throws out an Expedition map, and I throw out a Thraben Inspector. He throws out a second Tron land, so he will have Tron online on turn 3. I decide to drop the Prophetic Prism just so I can hit another land drop, and I actually do. So on my next turn, I'll be able to drop a Glinthawk and replay Prophetic Prism, or go for a Seeker of the Way, whichever I choose. On my opponent's turn, they decide to go for an island so that they can play an Astrolabe, and then throw down a second Expedition map. On my turn, I draw a Palace Sentinels, get in with my Thraben Inspector, drop Glinthawk to bounce my Prophetic Prism, and then go for a Seeker of the Way. Their turn, they're going to drop an Arkham's Astrolabe, and their final Tron piece, which lets them play a Moldrifter. Turn comes back to me, and I find an Astrolabe. Hoping to draw a land, I drop that, and I trigger my Seeker of the Way. I find a Molten Rain again that I can't cast yet, but I will be able to, and it should help me quite a bit. I attack with everything beside my Thraben Inspector, and they trade off with a Glint Hawk. And end step, fetch out a Urza's Tower. So they're up to 2 of those. They cycle a couple artifacts here. And drop a Muldrifter. Spend the rest of their mana on a couple of expedition maps. And I feel like it's worth it just to trigger my guys, keep them a little bit behind. And Molten Rain, that means that they're going to have to, if they don't have that Tron piece in hand, they're going to have to spend 2 mana to pop an expedition map. That 2 mana is kind of going to be multiplied since one of the lands that they're going to have to tap is an Urza's land. So essentially, this Molten Rain is blocking the land that they would have had, and then the 3 mana that they're using to pop that expedition map, if that makes any sense. I again attack in with my creatures that can't be beat by Muldrifter. It looks like exactly that happens that I was talking about with the mana, and they do have Tron online again, but they're at 8 mana, whereas before they could have potentially been at 13 if they just had a Tron mana in their hand, 14 if it was a tower. So now with that 8 mana, they are going to Rolling Thunder, blowing up most of my creatures. So my turn, I do feel a little bit of pressure. I do have him at 30 seconds, but I'm just going to keep trying to kill him. It sucks that I'm only at 3 land, but I'm just going to do some Glint Hawk shenanigans here. Attack in for 1, bring him down to 7. He's going to Forbidden Alchemy. Get in for 2 that I block, making sure that I'm a nice high life total, and he concedes the match, and we're back up to 2-2. We're breaking even. All right, round 5 against Jake Helms. This is a perfectly serviceable hand. I'm able to drop Thraben Inspector turn 1, a Forest out of my opponent, and it is the rare occurrence where Forest Go happens. Seeker of the Way off of the top I feel like is the obvious play if this is Stompy. If it's Elves, we also want to close the game out pretty quick. It does look like it's Elves, so instead of going for any of the other options we have in our hand, we're just going to drop a Prophetic Prism to see if we can draw into a burn spell. We just find another Seeker of the Way, but we'll go ahead and attack for 4 and live with ourselves. My opponent drops a Well-Wisher, so it looks like they had a bunch of 2-cost spells in their hand. Play a Birchlore Rangers, and then use their Birchlore Rangers to play another Priest of Titania. So they have a lot of mana available to them, and they're going to be able to start gaining life pretty quick. I decide to pop my Evolving Wilds and take the turn back. I do find a Lightning Bolt, which I immediately throw at that Well-Wisher to see if I can close out this game with relative speed. And I decide, instead of throwing down another Seeker of the Way, I'm going to try to find a removal spell for the pain that's coming by popping a Clue. My opponent drops a Birchlore Rangers, follows it up with a Winding Way, grabs 2 cards, drops a Timberwatch Elf, and then uses some of their remaining mana for a Lead the Stampede. They find only 2 cards off of Lead the Stampede, but they drop a second Timberwatch Elf, so it's going to be impossible for me to kill both of these Timberwatch Elves, at which point I scoop. I just don't think I can face 2 Timberwatch Elves with the board that I have. Maybe if I had some flying creatures, but I don't have any removal in hand. So let's move on to game 2. Game 2, I start off with a 1-land hand, but I think that that is keepable considering that there are 2 Searing Blazes in it. And of course, the most powerful card in the deck, Arkham's Astrolabe. Drop the Astrolabe, and I immediately draw the exact thing that I'm looking for. My opponent drops a Llanowar Elf. That's an easy Searing Blaze target, so we're going to take that out. They follow this up with a Priest of Titania. We draw Electrickery, which is going to allow us to cast Core Skyfisher, bounce our stuff, because we're happy to get a little behind here. On their next turn, they weirdly drop an Ivy Lane Denizen. Not exactly sure what that's doing in the deck, but we're happy to Lightning Bolt that and have it take up 4 of their mana so that we can drop a Seeker of the Way. They do drop a Gleeful Sabotage on our Arkham's Astrolabe, which, if they're going down cards in hand to try to deal with our artifact that's already done its job, that's fine, especially looking at our hand where we just have mono removal. We'll take out this next Ivy Lane Denizen so that we can get in with our creatures and attack them for 5. And we end up deciding that we want the extra damage. Just take out this Priest of Titania. They'll be down to 1 card in hand, which makes our opponent concede. final match against Jake Helm's tiebreaker. Once again, we have an Arkham's Astrolabe, a snow-covered land, and 2 Searing Blazes. We do need a mountain to enable our blazes, and we end up finding the mountain before we even cast our Astrolabe. Our opponent has a Kyrian Ranger, and they followed up with a Priest of Titania, which will be the target of our Searing Blaze. On their next turn, again with a Priest of Titania, we'll take that out, bounce our Astrolabe, and assert a creature onto the board. With Lead the Stampede this time, they do get a Timberwatch Elf, a Scattershot Archer, and a Land of War Elves. They are able to return a land with Kyrian Ranger, replay that, and get a Scattershot Archer. Start of our turn, we decide to go for an Astrolabe first. Shoot Scattershot Archer, throw down our Seeker of the Way to try to close this out. Our opponent does go a little bit crazy on their turn, dropping in Elvish Vanguard, Finhorn Elves, and a Land of War Elves all in the same turn, and they pass it right back on to us. On our turn, we draw a Palace Sentinels, which I'm a little bit surprised is even still in our deck, but right here, it is really, really good. We don't attack with any of our creatures. I think we can draw enough burn and wipes to win this game out. For our Monarch trigger, we draw an Arkham's Astrolabe, and it's their turn. On their turn, they start off with a Lead the Stampede and get the full 5 cards out of it. Drop a Timberwatch Elf and follow that up with an Elvish Mystic. They do attack with the Vanguard, and I just chump block. On my draw for turn, I draw a Searing Blaze and lead off with my Arkham's Astrolabe. I pop my clue and see what I can get in combat for free. I decide to keep my Palace Sentinels back since it doesn't fight that Vanguard very well, and they end up untapping that Vanguard and block my Seeker of the Way. I am able to bolt a couple of their creatures in response, getting my creature big enough that it will trade with theirs, and they're down enough guys that they can take Monarch, but it's going to be a quarter of their board to do so. They throw out Scattershot Archer, Timberwatch Elf, and Priest of Titania on their turn. I do have the Searing Blaze though. I go to combat, they untap with Kyrian Ranger and chump block my Palace Sentinels. I take out their Timberwatch with a Searing Blaze. I draw Lightning Bolt for my Monarch trigger, and I am able to close out the game. So we are now 3-2, finally positive. So let's get into match 6. All right, we are 3-2 now, and we are against Jonathan Alexander. Our opening hand doesn't have any threats, but it does have some removal and a Prismatic Strands, as well as the all-powerful Astrolabe. We're just going to start off by passing the turn and cycling our Ash Barons on their end step. They ponder, so this is looking like another fairy deck. Astrolabe draws a Thraben Inspector, so that's pretty perfect here. I would have preferred a Glinthawk, but that is fine. Looks like they have an Astrolabe of their own, so maybe not a fairy deck. So white, and they drop a Seeker of the Way. So this could be somebody trying to play Tireless Tribe, or something else entirely, maybe a little bit closer to our build, where there are like 3 and 4 color decks that are similar to mine. We Lightning Bolt and then take the turn back, attack with our Thraben Inspector, and pass with a whole bunch of removal up. Our opponent plays Archaeomancer, which means they're probably on an Ephemerate build. That should be fine since we have a Searing Blaze in hand to take out that Archaeomancer. We drop a Glinthawk, replay our Astrolabe, and pass the turn with Galvanic Blast up again. Our opponent's at 14. We have 8 damage in hand. Opponent plays Ponder. Follows it up with a Reaping the Graves. Storm count was 1 going into that, so they returned their Seeker of the Way and their Archaeomancer back to their hand. So killing them as quickly as possible is now our #1 priority. That Glinthawk is in our way, so in step we are going to remove that. Draw an Astrolabe, attack for 3, drop our Seeker of the Way, and pass the turn, leaving up Prismatic Strands. Drop a Seeker of the Way of their own, try to take that out on their end step. and they were going to ephemerate that in response. Since they only have one creature out and Ephemerate is not a May ability, that means that they're not going to be attacking us back on their turn. And we draw a Battle Screech. We just throw down that Battle Screech. We're going to be able to flash that back and attack for 6. They go down to 5. Of course, Ephemerate their guy. There's a Core Skyfisher, which makes this pretty awkward for us. Draw a Core Skyfisher of our own. Bounce our Astrolabe. Redraw. They take this opportunity to try to Lightning Bolt. We do have the Prismatic Strands, and we're going to do that right now to save our Seeker of the Way. And we do end up drawing a Plains that we don't really need. So we're just going to attack all out here. And we do attack with this, the Raven Inspector, which was a mistake. We could have eaten their guy if they blocked any other creature. But this is going to be a little bit awkward. They are able to Ephemerate their Core Skyfisher, which returns their Astrolabe, and we do not gain any life for lifelink. We're already at 24, so that seems pretty fine to me. Ephemerate comes down a second time on their Core Skyfisher. They don't really have any good targets to bounce, though, so they just bounce their Core Skyfisher, replay their Astrolabe, and they'll follow up with another Core Skyfisher bounce here. So they're back up to 7. And if we would have used strands there, we would have won the game on the spot here. Attack all out. And they decided to use fire on 2 of our birds. We're going to react to that with the bird we left back, use a Prismatic Strands. They're going to react to us using Prismatic Strands with a Lightning Bolt on our Seeker of the Way. And we're just going to bolt their face to get our Seeker of the Way out of bolt range, get them down to 4, and our creatures will do the rest and put us a game up against Jonathan Alexander. Game 2, we have an Astrolabe, a Core Skyfisher, and we are very happy with that. We're going to lead off with one of our untapped lanes so that we can put the Astrolabe out, and then turn 2, cast our Core Skyfisher. Our opponent just casts a second Astrolabe and sends it back to us. We go through with our plan of casting that Core Skyfisher and pass back to them. On our end step, they do bolt our Core Skyfisher, however, and then on their turn, play their own. We play an Astrolabe and yet another Core Skyfisher on our turn and pass back to them. They evoke a Moldrifter, and yeah, they Ephemerate that. So they draw 4 cards, and they're all set up to draw 2 more cards when Ephemerate rebounds on their upkeep. But we should be able to remove all of their creatures, attack them, and have that fizzle. On their turn, they have a Core Skyfisher again. Play their Astrolabe and remove our creature. Fetch. On our upkeep, we are going to fetch with Ashburns to do a little bit of thinning, and we do have a Battle Screech that we are going to cast just to get a couple of 1/1s. We are shy on artifacts, so these Galvanic Blasts can't take out their creature. On our turn, we get a Seeker of the Way, which we can use to flashback Battle Screech. They immediately tap out to play Lightning Bolt on our guy, which means we have an opening to take out their Moldrifter. Since they use Lightning Bolt and our creature is already a 3/3, we have an opportunity to shoot them in the face with our Galvanic Blast and get our creature out of range. So we're now down to 1 card in hand, and on their turn they drop an Archaeomancer, which means that they can remove our Seeker of the Way with the bolt they get back. We do draw a removal spell, so that means we can attack with our 4 power in the air and see if we can just race them. However, they do drop a Moldrifter on their side, so their attacking promptly stops. And they end up dropping a Seeker of the Way. Our turn comes around again, and we draw a Prophetic Prism, which cycles into a Lightning Bolt. We use the Lightning Bolt to try to go for this Moldrifter. That's just going to meet an Ephemerate, and now we are super behind. Ephemerate's gonna blink the Archaeomancer, which gets back the Ephemerate again, so they've got a little bit of a loop going there. And they drop in a second Archaeomancer, so they're going to be able to return multiple spells every turn. And the writing's probably on the wall, but we're going to go ahead and play this out. And we are ahead on time, so there's really no drawback to just playing it out, seeing if we could get a god draw here and maybe compete. Not very likely. Not very likely. Another Ephemerate means they get a lightning bolt back. They're going to be able to clear a path for their army, which doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. They just attack with 2 creatures, and we're able to take out a Muldrifter. But they keep coming. I draw a Prophetic Prism, cycle into Glinthawk. And finally, just find a land, and I am forced to scoop the match. Alright, game 3 against Jonathan Alexander. Opening hand seems fine. It's still a 1-lander, but I do have Astrolabe, so I'm going to lead with that. I'm going to have Pyroblast for their Muldrifters and things. I have removal. I have a fairly fast clock in Secret of the Way and Core Skyfisher. I'm a little confused with how they've set up their mana base. I'm not sure why these forests and things are in there, but there they are. Turn 3 comes around to us, and we use Astrolabe to trigger our Secret of the Way, get in for 3, follow that up with a second Secret of the Way to try to close this out quick. We do seem like the faster deck. They do find a Glinthawk, which they throw down, but we are able to bounce our land to enable Searing Blaze, take out their creature, and attack in for 6. On their turn, they drop an Astrolabe, followed by a Core Skyfisher, and drop a Bojuka Bog, which does not affect us that much. On our turn, we are able to remove their last creature, which gives us lethal, drop Astrolabe for good measure, and we could Pyroblast if we needed to, but they go to -2, and we go up to 4-2. Let's get into round 7, the final round. For our final round, we're going to be going against Pascal 3000. So, drops an Astrolabe, we drop a Glinthawk, and replay our Astrolabe to try to see what kind of cards that we can find. They do the same. Our turn comes around and we play a Core Skyfisher, replay that Astrolabe, and get in for Glinthawk. I think I would have attacked with Glinthawk before I played the creature in the Astrolabe if I could do that all again. Their turn, they drop Arkham's Astrolabe, Snow-Covered Mountain, Thraben Inspector, and then take out our Core Skyfisher. When it's our turn, we just take this opportunity to play a couple of Secret of the Ways. We have a whole bunch of non-creatures in our hand. Unfortunately, they are able to take out both of our Secret of the Ways and attack us for 1. When it's our turn again, we draw Lightning Bolt. We don't want to just go straight into Battle Screech, so we drop our Prophetic Prism, which draws us an Astrolabe. And finally, we drop a Thraben Inspector. Should be able to hold the ground unless they want to shoot this. They don't, so they just drop a second Thraben Inspector and pass the turn. Since we have this Thraben Inspector, we can cast Battle Screech and get the flash back immediately, so we'll go ahead and do that. We could stack block 1 and then bolt the other one. I think them bolting one of our guys and 2-for-1ing us, even if it's just one side of a Battle Screech, doesn't sound very good, so I would rather just go for the face here, since these birds are going to be pretty hard to remove, and I think I can pave a way with my bolt and Galvanic Blast. For turn, we draw a Prophetic Prism, decide to attack all out, do 5 to him, drop that Prophetic Prism, and finally get that Secret of the Way onto the battlefield. They immediately Lightning Bolt that though, and drop their own. Taking 2 from a couple of Thraben Inspector hits, and we will try to Galvanic Blast their Secret of the Way. This does meet a Prismatic Strands. Since we draw a Searing Blaze though, we pop our clue looking for a land and we do hit it. So now we can bait out the Prismatic Strands with Lightning Bolt, and then follow that up with Searing Blaze. This does allow our opponent to name white with Prismatic Strands, however, so we're not going to be able to attack this turn. Opponent has another Seeker of the Way, so now the racing plan seems pretty bad, and we decide to attack with our Battle Screech tokens before casting a Battle Screech. We get bitten pretty bad by this when our opponent kills our Thraben Inspector, so we're not going to get the second half of our Battle Screech, and this could have all been avoided just by the order of our spells. We could have another 2 power worth of creatures out. So our opponent is just trying to get it so we don't have 2 birds out, or just get Seeker of the Way as large as possible. I decide to just go face as much as possible to try to keep up while I'm searching for an answer for that Seeker of the Way, and I don't flashback Battle Screech yet. They do cast Core Skyfisher, so my attacking seems to be done, and I'm low enough that I think they could burn me out. I'm going to chump block here. Another draw, another land, and we're forced to pass the turn. They draw Faithless Looting, so they're going to have nothing but gas in hand. Find a Glinthawk, return an Astrolabe, play it again, trigger Seeker of the Way, again with the Glinthawk, same thing, get Seeker of the Way up to a 5/5. We're forced to block that 5/5. And since they're tapped out, we do elect to go for the triple block on the Core Skyfisher. We'll be able to keep one of our birds. I think it's the only way that we could possibly win this is to trade in those tokens where they're useful. They're not going to be attacking anytime soon, so that's as good as we can really ask for. On our turn, Core Skyfisher comes out of our deck, and we can cast our Astrolabe again, finds Thraben Inspector, pop that clue, and we have found a Searing Blaze, so we can finally remove that Seeker of the Way. This seems like our best opportunity to get that second half of that Battle Screech out finally, but that means we're tapped pretty low. He's going to be attacking with a lot of creatures. He's not going to be losing very many of those. I figure that going down to 3 is the same as going down to 1, so I'm just going to stack block here and see if I can stabilize. Unfortunately, he has that Lightning Bolt. So let's get into that next game, see if we can go 5-2. Our opening hand is good. It's Seeker of the Way and a couple of things to draw into some different stuff. Drop that Astrolabe turn 1. We are able to find a Core Skyfisher. This feels like a good opportunity to play the Seeker of the Way. We could draw more non-artifact spells, and for sure we're at least going to be recasting Astrolabe with Core Skyfisher. Seeker of the Way dies, but we go ahead with our Astrolabe plan. On their turn, they Galvanic Blast away my Core Skyfisher, and they have Gorilla Shaman. So this is what I wanted to do to my opponent. They use Gorilla Shaman to blow up a land, and I'm seeing already my victory slip away, and I take another 1 damage. I drop a Prophetic Prism, and I have to admit I lose my mind here. Play a Thraben Inspector. This is pure punt. I'm giving up an entire card. The only thing I'm gaining for it is my opponent has to tap a mana, and I'm sure they're happy to tap a mana to get a card. I've got Battle Screech available to me, and I don't see things getting any better, so I go for it. Of course, they have the Lightning Bolt for that Thraben Inspector. Gotta pass the turn back. They're popping that clue, and they have Glinthawk shenanigans. They throw out yet another Thraben Inspector, pass back to me, and I draw my Electrickery. I'm just going to take a second here, because I remember the moment where I drew this Electrickery. I remember putting it in my deck and thinking, if he has Battle Screech, this is the only way I beat it. But now, the only thing it's letting me do is block his 2 toughness creatures with my birds and then cast it, and that's a horrible way to get those off the field. And it also gets that Gorilla Shaman off the field so that I can play the rest of the cards in my hand finally. But overall, I am not happy to see this thing. I do have some other things I can do. I do those. Of course, Skyfisher puts that Astrolabe back in my hand where that nasty Gorilla Shaman can't eat it. And wouldn't you know, my opponent has Electrickery as well, takes out all of my birds, and I'm left with a 3-bin inspector, and that's it. I decide I'm going to cycle that astrolabe before I do anything, and instead of casting Electrickery to kill his Gorilla Shaman and then killing something else, I cast a Searing Blaze on it, making Electrickery completely useless now. I was still thinking, what if he has Battle Screech? He doesn't. So now I'm just blocking. Glinthawk comes down. I have nothing to fight that Glinthawk. I find a land for turn. It's Evolving Wilds. I'm going to be popping this to thin just a little bit. With 40 cards still left in my deck, it's not significant. And I don't have that many turns to keep drawing cards. Block again. Now I'm staring down 6 power with the creatures. 4 of that power I can't really ever block unless I draw something. He has 4 cards in hand, so he's got the card advantage. This Electrickery just sucks, but we'll see what this Glinthawk gets me. And it does get me a Galvanic Blast. So now I can trade with the Glinthawk, and I can kill that Core Skyfisher. That Journey to Nowhere means I'm not trading with anything. I'm still at 2 cards and he's at 4. I'm just gonna Galvanic Blast right now. And of course he has the Prismatic Strand since he's up so many cards. So now I can just block 1 of the damage, go down to 9. Draw another land. Definitely not what I want to see. I had a couple of turns that I could have won this game, and it has definitely all slipped away by now. I'm at 4. Galvanic Blast will kill me. They drop 3-bin Inspector. They drop Seeker of the Way. Pass back to me. I expect that clue's going to be popped and they're going to be looking for burn. Try to stabilize the best I can, but at this point there's just so many power worth of creatures I'm facing down. This is kind of what I want to do though, I'm cycling into more draw spells. I find the Palace Sentinels way too late. I don't know if there was a turn this game that it would have been good. They drop a Journey to Nowhere. I have nothing to block those air creatures with, even if they decide not to attack with everything and kill me anyway. That puts me at 4-3 and wraps up this video. I appreciate you guys staying until the end. Please like the video. It really boosts visibility, and subscribe for more Pauper content. If I can get to 1,000 subscribers, that's when they start considering you for monetization. And right now I don't make anything off of these videos. I'm kind of just doing it for fun, and it would be cool to get a little back. Also check out my podcast Common Knowledge, and I hope to be back with a spicy brew that won't win any games soon.